ChatGPT, relate ACIM to the movie What About Bob? What About Bob through the lens of A Course in Miracles? ACM. What About Bob through the lens of A Course in Miracles? ACIM. What About Bob is one of the funniest illustrations of ego dynamics ever put on film. Beneath the comedy lies a surprisingly insightful exploration of fear, control, judgment, identity, forgiveness, and the difference between intellectual understanding and actual peace. Through the lens of A Course in Miracles, the movie becomes a lesson in what happens when life refuses to follow the ego's carefully constructed plans. At its heart, the movie asks, what disturbs us more, the problem or our resistance to the problem? ACM would say, the resistance. Bob is the fearful mind. Bob begins the story overwhelmed by fear. Fear of elevators, fear of germs, fear of life, fear of uncertainty. The ego's thought system is fundamentally fear-based. Bob simply makes visible what most people hide. His fears appear exaggerated, but ACIM would suggest that fear is operating in everyone's mind to one degree or another. Bob becomes a symbol of the fearful mind seeking healing. Dr. Marvin as the ego. The great irony of the movie is that Bob appears psychologically unstable, while Dr. Marvin appears psychologically stable. As the story unfolds, the opposite begins emerging. Marvin becomes increasingly angry, controlling, defensive, judgmental, obsessive. ACM frequently points out that the ego often hides beneath appearances of competence and control. Marvin becomes a perfect symbol of the ego's need to manage reality. The need to control. Marvin's suffering grows in direct proportion to his desire to control Bob. The more he resists Bob's presence, the more disturbed he becomes. ACM teaches that peace is not found through controlling circumstances. Peace is found through changing perception. The movie brilliantly demonstrates this principle through comedy. Baby steps, Bob's famous phrase, baby steps, contains an unexpectedly ACIM-like lesson. The Holy Spirit rarely asks for giant leaps. Awakening often unfolds through small moments of willingness, small shifts in perception, small acts of trust. Bob's simple approach often succeeds where Marvin's complex theories fail. Share, intellectual understanding versus experience. Marvin writes books, gives advice, teaches others, yet he struggles to apply his teachings when challenged. Ace frequently distinguishes between understanding concepts and living them. The movie humorously exposes this gap. Knowledge alone does not bring peace. Application does. Judgment. Marvin constantly judges Bob, Bob's behavior, Bob's presence, Bob's impact on his life. ACM teaches that judgment always disturbs the one who judges. The movie beautifully demonstrates this. Bob becomes more peaceful while Marvin becomes more agitated. The source of suffering is revealed to be internal rather than external. Innocence. One of Bob's most endearing qualities is his innocence. He rarely intends harm. He simply wants connection. The Holy Spirit sees innocence where the ego sees problems. Throughout the film, Bob's innocence gradually becomes more apparent, while Marvin's judgments become more visible. The happy dream. ACIM describes a state called the happy dream. The world remains, but perception changes. Bob gradually begins relaxing, trusting, enjoying life, connecting with others. His experience becomes increasingly joyful. In many ways, Bob moves toward the happy dream while Marvin moves deeper into ego turmoil. Forgiveness. The film ultimately presents an opportunity for forgiveness, not because Bob changes dramatically, but because the perception of Bob can change. ACM teaches that forgiveness is the recognition that what we thought was causing our suffering is not actually the cause. The movie repeatedly points toward this realization. The central reflection. The ego watches What About Bob and asks, how do I get rid of the problem? How do I control the situation? How do I make Bob go away? The Holy Spirit watches What About Bob and asks, what if Bob isn't the problem? Viewed through ACM, the movie becomes a hilarious lesson in projection, judgment, and resistance. Bob symbolizes the fearful mind seeking healing. Marvin symbolizes the ego's need for control. The deepest message may be, the ego believes peace comes when external problems disappear. The Holy Spirit teaches that peace comes when resistance disappears. What we judge often becomes our classroom. What we resist often reveals our hidden beliefs. Sometimes the greatest teacher arrives disguised as the very person we wish would leave us alone. Go to nwge.org to find some movie clips and a brief write-up by David Hoffmeister.